As ever, we are going to start with maps to keep you all grounded in where we're starting. We're going to start in southern Gaza, but just a couple notes on previous episodes. I brought an update a couple weeks back about the ceasefire talks that were happening in Cairo and Doha. Hamas released a statement on Christmas Day that said negotiations for a ceasefire and captive exchange are underway in Doha with Qatari and Egyptian mediation. In a serious manner, they said, Hamas said. The movement has shown responsibility and flexibility. However, the occupation has introduced new issues and new conditions related to withdrawal, ceasefire, captives, and the return of displaced persons, which has been delaying the reaching of an agreement that was previously possible. So, Netanyahu, Army Radio reported that Netanyahu has brought to the table changes that were expected. That is what Netanyahu has done throughout these exchange talks, ceasefire talks. He brings new conditions um, to the table at the last minute that are not agreed upon. And just to remind people of the standard conditions, Hamas and Qassam's conditions and the other factions have all agreed on these conditions, and they've been solid on these principles throughout the entire war. Number one is to end the aggression, which is an obvious point in a ceasefire. Withdraw Israeli forces from the corridors. So you're looking at the map there on the screen. The corridors are the Philadelphia corridor that you see along the bottom of that map, which is the border with Egypt, and the Netzarim Corridor, which is the growing corridor in the center that divides Gaza City from central Gaza. So withdraw from the corridors, a return to people's homes in the north, the prisoner exchange, and then the reconstruction. And those have been something that Qassam has been stated and solid on. But what they have been flexible on is the implementation of those principles. The way that they are implemented, they can be done in a timed manner, in a timed withdrawal with guarantees. But it's not clear that the Americans can provide those guarantees. If Israel says we're going to withdraw in 60 days, that the Americans, the administration that's given $23 billion just this year alone to the genocide in Gaza can guarantee anything. But Netanyahu, in any case, brings at the last moment new changes that scuttle the talks, and that's what he has done all along. He told the Wall Street Journal earlier this week that I'm not going to agree to an end of the war before we remove Hamas. And just to remind you of Israel's goals, none of which have been achieved in this war, were number one, to return the captives, number two, to destroy Qassam, which they have failed. They have failed to return their captives, failed to destroy Qassam, destroy the Hamas government. They still have not done that. The administration in the Gaza Strip still exists. The healthcare system has been dismantled, as Nora so well reported. The education system has been dismantled, but it's rebuilt. It's rebuilt by Palestinians, and they're not going to be able to destroy Palestinian organization of their own lives. And number four, that Gaza is no longer a threat. So return captives, destroy Qassam, destroy the Hamas government, and make Gaza no longer a threat. None of those have been achieved. So Netanyahu is not going to agree to ceasefire talks when he cannot claim victory in this war. The only thing he can claim is the total destruction of Gaza. The World Health Organization pointed out the other day that 90% of the population of Gaza live in tents. Their homes were systematically destroyed over these past 14 months. And once people were in shelters, before their tents, the shelters were destroyed systematically, one by one, destroyed and burned. Scorched earth policy on the shelters that we've been covering, and that the Israeli military brags about in their field reports. And of course, as Nora so well described in the devastating news report, they've dismantled the hospital system. Again, hospitals that have already been dismantled are being redismantled. And those are the only accomplishments that the Israelis have in this war: the destruction of the civilian population of Gaza and a genocide the whole world has seen live streamed now for 14 months. If we look at map number 2, we zoom in on Rafah, you can get a better sense of the Philadelphia corridor. This is the corridor that Netanyahu says they cannot give up. Back in the summer, he said that this was critical to stop weapons shipments to Gaza. But of course, anyone's been following the resistance report for the last 15 months knows that it's not imported weapons that have been underpinning this struggle for the Palestinians over the last 15 months. It's indigenous manufactured weapons that the Palestinians have made themselves inside the Gaza Strip, so that they're not dependent on changes in the international actors or access, or something like cutting off the Philadelphia corridor, which I highly doubt the Philadelphia corridor is cut off. The Israelis have talked about tunnels on the border that they dismantled, but all those tunnels were commercial tunnels. They're very close to the border. There's almost certainly deeper tunnels that they're not involved in anywhere in Gaza, into the deeper layer, the under layer of the tunnels where the fighters are, where their captives are. They haven't gone into any of those. And that has been the case for 14 months. Any tunnels that you hear the Israelis talking about are all within 15 meters of the surface. And we know that there's tunnels that go 4 and 5 times deeper than that. And that is why the Qassam brigades have been able to continue fighting. That's why Israel's unable to return any of their captives. And that is the same condition that's going on in the Philadelphia corridor. But this week, we're going to focus on Khan Yunis because, well, I'll just show you one more thing. On the coastline above Khan Yunis, that's where Mawasi is. Mawasi is the designated safe area that was hit with multiple drone strikes this week alone. Mawasi is a tiny piece of land. It's essentially sand dunes that used to be completely encircled by the Gush Katif settlement in that was on the coastline in front of Khan Yunis. So Palestinians, the Israelis say there's 1.9 million Palestinians in Mawasi in those conditions that Abu Bakr was talking about, right on the water in the middle of these damning storms that have been happening. And it's just a brutal situation for Palestinians. The first operation we're going to look at is number 3. There was a Qassam operation, another Zuari drone operation. You can see the fighters there checking the wire fidelity and setting up what is essentially a missile with wings, essentially a miniature cruise missile that's made, and you can see it with the prayer there sent off into the air. This is a Qassam built, obviously, you could tell by the way it was put together. Qassam built Zuari explosive laden one-way attack drone, and the Qassam brigade said that on December 19th at 11:30 a.m. that they targeted the Magan military site with an al-Zuari suicide drone. So that's what you're looking at. That's a rear base, Israeli military base on the other side of the border from Khan Yunis. And if we look at the next shot, you can see this is the first time that we've seen from inside Israel, Israeli civilian footage showing the Zuari drone in flight. And of course, we saw lots of that from Lebanon and also from Ansar Allah and the Yemeni armed forces from Yemen. But this is the first time we've seen drones over Palestine since October 7th, shot by Israeli civilians. And the Israeli military claims they shot that down. That drone, that hundreds of dollar drone, was shot down with an Apache attack helicopter. So again, you get the discrepancy between the weapons Israel's using and the ones that Palestinians are using, indigenously made to defend themselves. And we've moved up to the Netzarim corridor here with the map I wanted to talk a little bit about this because last week I talked about how upsetting it was to redraw the maps, and I just want to be clear and not that I was upset about it, but I don't want to overstate the fact that this does not have to be a permanent um, installation. And the things that the Israelis are building in the Netzarim corridor, it's expanding because of the destruction of all of Gaza. So to the north, you can see Zaytun neighborhood in Tel El Hawa, and to the south, the Nusrat camp. The Israelis are calling the Netzarim corridor, they're now calling it the Be'eri corridor for Kibbutz Be'eri, which is on the other side of the border. It's called Netzarim Corridor in our language because it's the name of what it used to be when there was the Netzarim settlement in the center of Gaza. That was a critical settlement to divide Gaza, and effectively have the same purpose when there was Israeli settlements in Gaza, as it serves now, to divide the strip in half, and to allow the Israelis to attack from the north and from the south into the center of the camp. So there was a couple articles this week. If we look at the next map, there was a map. There was an article in the in Haaretz about how this area had become a kill zone, and the line of contact, which is what I said was expanding. Maxwell updated the maps for us to show the expansion of the Netzarim corridor since the original maps we created early on in the war. But you can see by the this Haaretz map that went along with a brutal story that I'm not going to read from because it's just a litany of war crimes by the Israeli military. But the edges of the corridor are called the line of contact. That is the outer edge of the Netzarim corridor. And Haaretz talks about the line of contact, and they interview soldiers from the 252nd Division that refer to the line of contact as the line of dead bodies. It says, while Palestinians are officially prohibited from entering, the reality is more severe than a simple exclusion zone. It's, quote, military whitewashing, explains a senior officer in Division 252 who has served three rotations in Gaza. The division commander designated this area a kill zone, the senior officer said. Anyone who enters is shot. Recently discharged Division 252 officer describes the arbitrary nature of the boundary. For the division, the kill zone extends as far as a sniper can see, but the issue goes beyond geography. We're killing civilians there and then we're counting them as terrorists. The IDF spokesperson's unit casualty numbers have turned into a competition between units. If Division 99 kills 150, the next unit aims to kill 200. So this is just further proof from the Israeli military of what I've been describing to you for the last 14 months about the ridiculous nature of Israeli casualty figures of fighters, because they'll say we killed 200, we killed 250 fighters overnight. There's no indication that the Palestinian resistance is losing 250 fighters in a night. In this Haaretz article that goes with this map that you're seeing, they show you that they're counting civilians, they're counting non-existent fighters in their body counts to try to rack up a number that's then used by Netanyahu to say 20,000 Qassam fighters have been killed, which is not true. And were it to be true, would be a more interesting story than just that 20,000 had been killed, because it would mean that the Qassam brigades are clearly regenerating themselves to be able to continue fighting. So it's just sort of layers on layers of propaganda that we're seeing. So the one thing that I wanted to point out on this map is that you can see the corridor is the road, Street 10, that runs through the area. And you can see the military positions are all along that road. So the expansion of the corridor doesn't correspond to any military positions. It's actually just indicative of destroyed buildings on the outside. So if we look at the next one tomorrow, you can see it in English. They're pointing to the positions. You can see the positions are all right along the original Netzarim corridor. And all of these positions, even the Israeli military admitted it in this story to the New York Times, all of these positions can be taken up in an hour. They're pillbox military bases, which means slabs of concrete that are put in place. These can be removed in hours, literally. I reported from Gaza during the disengagement when Israel left Gaza, and they up and left Gaza in a day and a half is what it took to actually leave Gaza. So the Netzarim Corridor, if Israel believed in a ceasefire negotiation and cared about getting their prisoners back, the Netzarim Corridor should not be a problem to that. It could be pulled up as easily as the settlements were. Although the destruction is just criminal, and entire villages are erased in creating this. Thousands of homes destroyed, and fertile land in Wadi Gaza, in the Gaza Valley, is fertile farmland where all those crops have all been destroyed. Those homes, those villages, all have to be completely rebuilt. But that's the Netzarim corridor dividing Gaza. Israel, in order to facilitate the ceasefire agreement that Hamas will accept, Israel has to leave the Philadelphia corridor and the Netzarim corridor. Both those things have to happen. I would be extremely surprised if there's an exchange without those two conditions. Those, like I said, the flexibility might be on the timeline, but not on the principle of leaving. No Palestinian leadership can accept the occupation of the Gaza Strip, and no American one can either. They've been promising that since the beginning of the war, that there couldn't be any territorial changes to Gaza. But all their red lines have been blown through and proved to be nothing but words. So we'll have to stay on this story. But that's where we are with the ceasefire agreement and the two corridors that are at the heart of it. But in the Netzarim corridor, there's been a number of operations. If we look at number 7, the Israeli military. Here we see an M113. This is these robot M113s. They have thousands of them that were given to them by the Americans. And you could see on the top of that one that it had an 𝐓𝐡𝐞 remote control system that operates them. They use them as car bombs. Here are fighters emerging and sees. We're going to note this tank has both crew members, presumably the gunner and the commander, both outside the hatches for that Yassin strike from up close. This is in Nuseirat. The Israelis attacked from the north. You can see there on the top of the M113, that is the remote control device that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 has retrofitted to make these into remote control bombs. In the field report, 𝐶asahm said that they got that M113 before getting this tank with the two crewmen riding outside. Nuseirat hasn't been. I mean, you can see the destruction all around there. This is an area of the middle camps that Israel hasn't occupied militarily. They've destroyed it by shelling it, which you can clearly see there. They've destroyed it by shelling it and with airstrikes. And of course, if people remember back in the summer, there was a raid there for Israel to get 3 of their captives back when they carried out the Nuseirat massacre. 276 Palestinians were killed, 700 wounded in the operation to rescue the only 3 Israeli captives that have been freed. So that is an operation that carries out from the Netzarim corridor, allowing the Israelis to move into the center and attack down. In order to attack Nuseirat without the Netzarim corridor, Israel would have to traverse the land across from the east, from the border to the east, which makes their troops much more susceptible to resistance attacks. So the Netzarim corridor, you're watching it there be used, and a number of casualties. The Israelis claim 2 casualties in the Netzarim corridor. They didn't say under the circumstances, but you could be pretty sure that you just watched them there, considering the 2 tank crew riding outside. Number 8, in the same operation, 𝐶asahm was able to capture a drone. And I got a bunch of questions about these drones. These drones are just commercial drones. The one that you're looking at here, this is a Matrice drone. It's a G drone, Chinese company, but you can see it's holding an Israeli hand grenades. So this army with 500 fighter jets bombing constantly is dropping hand grenades from these. And you can see this device there. I translated it for you. It's got a grenade launcher on the actual drone. So they use these. Nora talks about them in the news report every day. Sometimes they have grenade launchers, sometimes they carry guns, sometimes they carry speakers that have crying babies or try to draw people out with voices to try to draw people out into the streets to be shot by these same drones. So 𝐤𝐿 captured one. That was one of 8 captured drones since you last saw me. And again, just to point out, all these operations happened since you last saw me. We're still doing that. Number 9. The Netzarim Corridor is daily the subject of artillery strikes by the Joint Operations Room. That's pointing out the headquarters of the infantry brigade that is positioned along the 99th, or that's part of the 99th Division at the moment. The 99th Division is in the corridor. So the fighters have the ability to target consistently along this line, and their targeting gets more accurate the more they fire. And you can see in this video here by 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐿 that they are hitting with mortars the intended targets, and they're going to show, you're going to see after this mortar round, a military ambulance leaving from the infantry position along the base, and you can see it driving there along the bottom of the screen. It's identified there in the red. That's a military ambulance, and you can see it's driving with urgency after that operation. That's one of 12 operations by the Joint Operations Room targeting the Netzarim Corridor in the last week and a half since you saw us last. And number 10 is another one, a joint operation. A lot of these operations are joint operations. You can see 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐿 and the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades of Fatah, who are aligned with the Palestinian Authority. And the commander of this operation says he critiques the Palestinian Authority's security cooperation in Jenin, and he says that the operation in Jenin by the Palestinian Authority is political suicide for the Palestinian national movement. So that's the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, Fatah aligned, critiquing their own party. And the operation in Jenin that is now 2 weeks old and effectively a siege. You're seeing 107 millimeter rocket artillery here. Again, we see the martyrs, previous martyrs on pictured on the controller, just like we see in the West Bank, pictured on their guns or on their lockets. You see kids with martyrs on their lockets because at this point in the war, everybody has been touched by death. And they all mark it. You could see on the wall of this operation as well, Fatih Shikaki, who is the founder of Islamic Jihad. So I just wanted to bring some news from the Netzarim Corridor. We don't get to do that every week, but this week we will do that. Now we'll head up north where the vast majority of the operations have been taking place, of course. And focusing in on the north, Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, Jabalia Camp, and Jabalia have been the focus of the operation. The main focus has been dividing Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia from the Jabalia Camp, which is 𝐓𝐿 𝐴Dwan is actually in Beit Lahia. They're calling it. The Israelis celebrated the sacking of 𝐓𝐿 𝐴Dwan Hospital, saying that it was the last Hamas bastion in Jabalia, which is, we're going to find out over the next weeks and months, is absolutely not true. It's a civilian hospital that was dismantled in the same way as all the 36 other hospitals that were dismantled. And it was a brutal week to be watching Israel do that, carrying out those atrocities. But that's the main point, is cutting off Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun from the Jabalia camp and Jabalia. All of that from Beit Lahia, Jabalia camp, Jabalia, and Gaza City, it's all one contiguous population. If you're driving, you don't know when you're leaving one area and entering the other. It's all an urban built up area that's all being targeted and destroyed. I'll bring Beit Hanun back in, so keep an eye on where Beit Hanun is in the upper east corner there, because that was the first place that the Israelis invaded, and they have now invaded again after 𝐓𝐿 𝐴Dwan Hospital. They're going for Beit Hanun. But let's look at number 21 here, and maybe I'll get Tamara to throw my Twitter up on the ticker, because you're going to need to go to my Twitter for these ones, because following the guidelines of the YouTube community guidelines, which we follow diligently by blocking out, pixel masking the soldiers, as you can see here. This was a sniper operation, an Al-Ghul sniper operation west of Jabalia, west of the city of Jabalia. And this was one of 6 sniper operations and one of 60 operations that took place in the 10 days since you last saw me reporting the resistance report. Number 22 is another sniper operation. You can see the tank crew on top of their Namur troop carrier here, and you can see those 2 boxes. They look almost like fans. They might be speakers on the top. This Al Ghul shot, you can actually watch. You can see the heat distortion of the round being fired, and it hits right on the triangle guy there. But it hits the box in front. But as I've shown you the size of the round of the Al Ghul round, and it goes clean through those. The Israelis admitted that a tank commander in the 401st Armored Brigade, 9th Battalion, was seriously wounded by sniper fire in northern Gaza. So that's what we are looking at in this case here. And number 23 is another one. This was one of these operations that it sure looked like 2 for 1, 2 hits, 2 birds with 1 stone, 2 soldiers with 1 round. The Israelis later admitted an IDF officer was killed during fighting in northern Gaza earlier today. They named the slain soldier. He was a platoon commander in the multi-domain unit. That's their Ghost unit, Special Forces unit. And another soldier in the unit was seriously wounded in the same event. So it sounds like it's not always easy to cross-reference. And of course, Israel covers up their casualties. But in some circumstances, you can cross-reference them. And I believe that that's what we've got there. So I brought that to you. And number 24 is interesting. This was from a tank commander in the Israeli military who brought this out of Gaza at the end of November. And he said that throughout his tour in Gaza, that the Qassam snipers were firing on the Trophy active protection system. You can see there that's what you're looking at there is the Trophy active protection system that fires an anti-missile missile out. It works more like a shotgun blast, but it fires a munition out of that system there. And the tank commander pointed out that there's a concerted effort by the resistance to fire on these active protection systems in an attempt to dismantle them and possibly to have them to detonate the round that's inside them. But that's just something to keep an eye on. That was brought from an Israeli tank commander that I wanted to share with you guys because we haven't seen that, but it's obviously happening and something we'll keep our eyes peeled for. And number 25, we've got 2 of the 6 tanks and APCs that were hit by Ceasefire. Still Ceasefire, still operations with the Yassins. This week alone, there was 3 tanks, 3 APCs, and thermobaric warheads versus 6 positions. So we're seeing this is in western Jabalia. Jabalia is encircled, so we are getting operations on the east side and on the west side. So there's that in that shot right there. That's the tank, the Merkava being hit, and then you're going to see the second scene is the Namur there. He's backing up, putting up a smoke screen to try to cover himself, but you can see that he's hit right there. You can see the blast wave from being hit through the smoke screen there. So that is 2 more. Number 26, we got a fighter here making tea, making some chai for his fellas. He says, this is a message directed at the leaders of the occupation army, which is a failure and of weak character. Your forces remain in the resilient northern Gaza without goals or achievement except for the killing of civilians and demolishing residential neighborhoods. And the army is less than 800 meters away from me right now. We're not afraid. After the thousands of tons of explosives you've dropped on our civilians and on our people, we place our trust in God. And here you see the fighter putting the thermobaric warhead together. And now you see the fighter out in the devastated terrain. No way to see that fighter. He's able to move into position through the destruction of people's homes. It's just appalling what we're watching. There's not really any words for it. But now we're seeing it from a second angle. He's going to get into position, and you're going to see a direct hit on a troop position with a thermobaric warhead, which is a fuel air explosion. So once the round enters that room, it's not a good place to be. It's not something that you want to have happen. Again, fighting in the devastated terrain warfare. This is one of 6 thermobaric warhead operations that happened just since you last saw me. And number 27, we have a detailed operation by 𝐓𝐿 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿. Here we're watching drone footage from the Israelis. This is an Israeli drone looking in here, and this drone was then captured by 𝐓𝐿 𝐄𝐿. They put up on the screen here that we are watching Israeli drone footage from the 21st of September, and you can see that this is Israeli drone footage, and then 𝐓𝐿 𝐄𝐿 captures that drone footage, and this commander's describing how they used that captured drone footage with all of the Israeli positions on it and where the drone is landed with the crew. They gleaned significant information. They matched what they got on the captured drone with their field reconnaissance and set up an ambush in this key intersection that the commander is pointing out here, that they're going to place explosives in all 4 of the exits of this key intersection. And it's interesting because it's not an intersection per se, because the Israelis don't drive on the roads, right? That's their primary concern, is that the roads have roadside bombs in them. And so they take alternative routes. Here you see the fighters planting the explosives. They plant multiple type of explosives. They planted multiple barrel bombs and explosively formed penetrators, EFPs, which are devastating weapons for the armored vehicles. Here they're noting monitoring the troops. You can see in the upper corner there, they get the red triangle. They're entering the ambush zone that was set up using this. There they are again in the entering the ambush zone. We have multiple CCTV cameras. They've got cameras outside showing you the positions of the explosive devices that were planted. So this is a detailed operation. And here, this is post-detonation. That shows the smoke from the burning armored vehicle, but also from the smoke screen that the Israeli military puts up to try to extract their troops. And this was one of 12 IED operations versus tanks and 2 APCs just since you last saw me. And there you go. There's the medevac. Always a sign of casualties, multiple casualties. So a sophisticated operation carried out by 𝐓𝐿 𝐄𝐿 under the 70 days, 80 days into the siege. They're still able to carry out these operations. And they're also able to continue firing rockets from that territory. I'll get to that in a moment after number 28, because this is another detailed ambush. This is the Hunting of the Snakes ambush by 𝐓𝐡𝐞. This is a multiple IED operation in Beit Lahia, just south of Beit Lahia. The Hunting of Snakes ambush, they talk about here how they lured the force of snakes. You can see there's the ambush zone. They lured the force into a tight ambush, is what the text told you. You can see here, those are the 2 positions of the IEDs. I edited a little bit this out, but there's 15 soldiers that come in here looking around. The Israelis said that they haven't been operating in this area before and since the beginning of the war. So they're looking around and exiting. And there's their other type of drone they use. That's an 𝐓𝐴TA, a 𝐓𝐴TA. That's an Israeli drone. You can see I froze it in the upper corner there. They got a bunch of questions in the question answer show about drones. That's the most common drone that they use, and they're on a unit level. They're just in the soldiers' backpacks. You can see the soldiers up there in the up on the left side of the screen. So they're driving their drones from like, tens of feet, tens of meters away, and they use those drones. The Ovadas have rotor covers on them, so they come inside and are they'll case a house using it. And that's what we saw there. So those two Israeli soldiers are standing right in front of the IED. That's what they're pointing out, and the no video cuts. The explosion goes off, and these guys run for safety to take up outer positions. But 𝐤𝐿 points you to this picture: 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 soldiers in this ambush zone that were hit. And the Israeli military only acknowledged 3 killed in this operation and several severely wounded. But they're showing you the detonating of the multiple devices on the one side and on the other. And then they posted this. I blurred out the soldiers' faces. I don't know why we have to do that. I don't think we should have to do that. The Israeli military put their faces out, but 𝐤𝐿 took from the IDF website their 3 faces and then put question marks and basically said the enemy hides its true losses. Question mark. Where's the others? We saw the 14 of them standing there side by side. 𝐤𝐿 says, due to the security situation, full details of the operation are not disclosed at the moment, but more will come soon. So that was a detailed operation that the Israelis themselves admitted to falling into. They said Army radio report from the IDF said that the attacking force entered an alley where the first IED exploded on the soldiers. 3 soldiers fell from this IED, and another soldier was seriously wounded. A short time later, another force arrived in the area, and the second bomb exploded. There were no casualties from this bomb, is what they said, even though we saw clearly both of the units arrived at the same time or run right after each other. So you do get these kernels of truth, but this is where 𝐤𝐿 is saying, where's the rest of the casualties? And Abu Ubaidah on that same day of this operation said the heroism of our 𝐤𝐿 fighters and the performance on the northern front of the Gaza Strip serves as an inspiring model for all free people of the world. The enemy conceals its true losses and the dire condition of its soldiers in the north to preserve the image of its army and to preserve its morale. The genocide and ethnic cleansing in northern Gaza is to target innocent civilians, to cover up the scandals and failures of the Zionist army. The fate of some army captives is tied to the occupation's advance by hundreds of meters in certain areas under attack. So that was Abu Ubaidah. And I wanted to just bring you, this was over the last 36 hours, the Israeli military pulled the Nahal Brigade off the Philadelphia corridor, replaced them, and moved them up to begin an operation in Beit Hanun. And the Palestinian resistance greeted that operation by firing 5 rocket barrages, one deep into Israel that required 3 Iron Dome interceptions, and the others were rocket barrages on the border and the troops that were amassing on the border to carry out this Beit Hanun operation. So an area that Israel believed that they had operational control over 13 and a half months ago, they're coming back to after 80 days siege of the north, and they're immediately greeted by rockets, both at their troops and behind their lines into their population centers, so that the whole country of Israel can watch their Iron Dome interceptors. These are messages, statements by the Palestinians that say we're still here, we're still able to fire rockets, and the Israeli military communications always have shock. Their correspondents are shocked that they're still able to fire. I just wanted to bring a couple operations from the West Bank too while we are here with the resistance report. This first operation is in Tubas, showing off their makeshift IEDs. Sarai al-Quds, Tubas Battalion. These operations are all in Al-Farah camp, which is just south of Tubas, a center of resistance in the northern West Bank. D9 bulldozers in two D9 bulldozers we're watching get hit by those IEDs. in Al-Fara camp. This is the second one. You can see it move right over top of the planted device. Many of these devices are planted because Israel punitively ripped up all the roads and all the water lines to punish Palestinians. If we look at 36, we get the same thing. This is Saraya's Tulkarm Brigade. These operations take place in the Tulkarm camp. This is 3 IEDs versus 3 D9 armored bulldozers. And again, these bulldozers are in short supply. One of the reasons why Israel wasn't able to carry out their operations um, in Lebanon is because they were held back. They weren't able to get through the first defensive lines of Hezbollah, and the need for these bulldozers was put on display in that situation. And they're complaining that the Americans aren't giving them their shipment of D9 armored bulldozers. It's unclear if that's actually the case or if the delay is if the delay is mechanical or human rights related, because there's been no real holdback of weapons at any point in this war by the American government. As I said, $23 billion has been given to the Israelis to fight this war in weaponry.